To be or not, that is the Questy Ho. Now if that sounds more like nonsense than Shakespeare, that's because it is. It's the work of comic genius Stanley Unwin, who was famous for his own brand of nonsense talk called Unwinese. Stanley died in 2002, but I've been given a chance to share with you some of his wonderful creations that have never been shown before on TV.
His ability to communicate with people of all nations is legendary. Would you please welcome Britain's ambassador to the new single European language, Professor Stanley Unwin!
The Jim Davies foot in Stoker was wonderful, and the scintillating eyefold of Mel is wonderful.
Stanley Unwin was a familiar face in both TV and films for more than 50 years. He worked with some of the legends of British broadcasting, people like Frankie Howerd and Norman Wisdom. And for most of his life, his home was right here in the village of Long Buckby in Northamptonshire. One of Stanley's old friends was filmmaker Paul Foxall. He was a frequent guest at Stanley's Long Buckby home.
I was up here having a cup of tea with Stanley one day, and he said to me, why don't you come back with a film crew next time and record an interview with me? Because I'd like to do that anyway. Plus the fact it would give you something to remember me by. And it was kind of, that in a way was a legacy, if you like. Not just because we were long-standing friends, but it was also a legacy. And I was very proud, very honoured to be able to do that.
The footage recorded on that day has never been shown. Until now, here for the first time, we can reveal Stanley talking about his private life, as well as performing new sketches.
To be and not, that is the Questy Ho. Whether all suffery, the slings of outrage of deep folly focus there, what? Or take arms of sea of trouble and buy a posy endy ho.
Away from the camera, Stanley Unwin led a very different life. Born in South Africa in 1911, his family moved back to England when he was a child. Sadly, his mother struggled to cope, and Stanley was sent off to an orphanage.
There were 12 of us to start with. We were all given numbers. I was number 2. A chap called Donovan Francis was number 1, and he came from Saffron Walden. Fancy remembering this. And his name was DSF, Donovan Sudbury Francis. And as I say, up to 9 or 10 of us at this orphanage, and we had quite a happy time until it began to expand, and they had more and more inmates.
After his time in the orphanage, Stanley entered the world of work. His first job included a very brief stint as a sailor.
I got up on the poop deck and I met the bosun, and I felt so proud that as we rowed down the Severn, you know, the Bristol Channel, into the English Channel, I never felt a more elated feeling of joy in all my life. But then having mentioned all that, we then touched upon the Bay of Biscay and I became a different person. I felt nothing like so royal as I did standing on the poop deck, and it was a case of pukey over the side. Oh dear. Mal de mer, deep folly.
Stanley quickly realised he wasn't cut out for a life at sea. He enjoyed tinkering with radio equipment though, and this eventually led to a job in the sound department of the BBC. He would work there for more than 20 years. Stanley had always been fascinated by language and was frequently making up words, but it was during his time at the BBC that he really developed his own unique way of communicating. It came to be known as Unwinese.
There's not a lot of logic in the Unwinese. I think it's the ideas more than an imagery moving past that one tries to grab a word, and maybe part of the word that expresses the idea comes out. Possibly enough of it joined to the next syllable which conveys perhaps an idea of what one is trying to say.
Yes, and oft when on my couch I lay old prostratus there, in jocular or in pensive moody, they flashed upon their inward eyebold. Oh, they're all bliss of solitude ho, nothing morbid old, oh no though. And then my heart all jumpy huffalo dowder, and dancing with the daffy down dillies. What could be more enjoyable than a spring mould in the winter mould? Oh, very few.
He often used reference to the basic English 25, which was his reference to what we might call the Queen's English, and that his double talk, his facility was, well, a mangling and adaptation of that language.
At home, he delighted in entertaining his 3 young children. Even nursery rhymes never sounded quite the same in the Unwin household.
When we were young and he used to come home very tired, we'd say, "Dad, story please, story." And he'd immediately start slipping into something like "Once Upon a Taito."
He used to do the ordinary nursery rhymes, the traditional nursery rhymes, in his own language and turn them back to front and that sort of thing. Yes, made it more fun.
Jilly Jacob, bucket taker, up the hill and trotty. Jack for lollop, scalp and split. What a lot you got-y. Oh. This was the Watergate get, if you follow my meal, because Jilly over tumload and there was gloom on the proceedings.
It wasn't long before Stanley's unique talent was spotted and he was performing to a wider audience.
One day, a BBC producer who stayed overnight heard me doing it and said, "Hey, you know, that's funny, I want to do that." And I said, "I mustn't mess about with the language, you know." He said, "Oh," he said, "but the way you do it is funny, you know." And that's really how I started getting into show business.
Stanley started out performing Unwinese as a guest on popular radio shows in the 1950s.
And the average lighter will gradually develop it down to a very tiny triddly-howdy lighter. Also, it's going to make it simpler for the housewife in the laundrette where rotating the blankie. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Stanley's radio appearances were just the start of a long career as an entertainer. Stanley soon became a familiar face on television too.
Seeing Dad on television when he started to become famous, well, it was just really exciting. We just used to sit there and watch it avidly, and it didn't matter what he did. I mean, we just used to think he was really funny, and we used to just tell everybody, "Look, that's our Dad, you know, isn't he wonderful?"
Well, the boy got the torch, right, and he wanted this to shine in the eyeball of the female of the species, so he know that joy loved kissy, right?
As well as TV shows, Stanley also popped up in a number of films, including Carry On Regardless and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Now, obviously, as Stanley's children, apart from him, you know the Unwinese language better than anybody else. Can you teach me any of it, or is it impossible to learn?
Possible.
Possible. So if I were to say, "Hello, pleased to meet you," or "pleased to see you," how would that translate in Stanley's language?
Greeting most in the early morning.
Yes, goodly Maudload.
Goodly Maudload. That's just good morning, is it?
Yeah.
Goodly Maudload.
Yes.
Greety most, as you said.
That would do as a starter.
Yes.
Do as a start. With all his words, is there an Unwinese dictionary that you can refer to with all these words in?
Sadly, we've never got to compile the dictionary
Yeah.
yet.
No, we thought about it quite
Yes,
a
give
bit.
us time.
Great, so you could do a dictionary.
Yes.
I can see it now, the language course, like learning French or Chinese. There'll be Unwinese, there'll be students going around with their headphones on saying "Goodly Mo."
Goodly Maudload.
Goodly Maudload. Goodly. Oh, see, I can't get it right.
First of all, we must remember the microphobia is a very low level, minus 60 decibels low. And that draws up this level load.
We used to walk through a scene together, give him a rough idea of the kind of dialogue you needed, but let Stanley choose the words that he knew would turn into Unwinese. Because he wasn't an actor, he would admit not being an actor, so he can't repeat things, and consequently you have your fingers and legs crossed that he'll get it on the first take, and he usually does.
Reversible everything and comes out amplified up to the people's eardrums.
Stanley was still performing on television well into his late 80s.
Colour balls, all 6 of those, all pretty marked with sterling pound figure.
Stanley Unwin died in 2002, and with him went a unique talent.
There's a chance here for a doubly hug.